Elena Rodriguez pressed her face against the small window of her transport ship and watched the Galactic Confluence Station grow larger. The massive structure spun slowly around a neutron star, its metal surface gleaming like a jewel in the strange blue light. She had traveled for 3 months to reach this place, carrying the hopes of 4 billion humans spread across 47 worlds. The station was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It stretched for hundreds of kilometers, with docking bays that could hold entire fleets. Ships of dozens of different species came and went like insects around a hive. Elena saw vessels that looked like floating crystals, others that seemed made of pure energy, and some that defied any description at all. "First time seeing the real Galaxy, Ambassador?" asked Captain Walsh, the ship's commander. He was an old space dog who had been flying between human colonies for 20 years. "First time representing all of humanity," Elena replied. She touched the small pin on her jacket, the blue and green Earth symbol that marked her as humanity's voice to the stars. Her transport ship docked at one of the smaller bays. The moment Elena stepped onto the station, she felt the difference. The gravity was lighter than Earth normal, and the air had a metallic taste. But what struck her most was the silence. Everywhere she looked, alien beings moved through the corridors with careful, measured steps. They didn't speak to each other unless necessary. When they did, it was always in hushed tones. Elena watched a group of tall, insect-like creatures walking behind a floating crystal being. The insects kept their heads bowed and never looked directly at the crystal. "Welcome to galactic civilization," Elena muttered under her breath. A guide met her at the docking bay. It was a reptilian creature with green scales and golden eyes. "I am Sktar of the Kresh people," it said in accented but clear English. "I will show you to your quarters." As they walked through the station, Sktar explained the basic rules. You must always give way to higher-ranked species. The Veltar are at the top. They are the crystal beings. Then come the Zephyrians, who look like living light. Below them are the Takari, the insect people. "What about you?" Elena asked. "Where do the Kresh rank?" Sektar's shoulders slumped slightly. "We are number 8 of 12. We have been members for 3,000 years, but we still must show proper respect to our betters." Elena's quarters were small but clean. Through her window, she could see the neutron star spinning below, its surface crackling with energy that could power 1,000 worlds. But her mind was on what she had seen in the corridors. Over the next week, Elena attended various diplomatic meetings and formal presentations. She watched how the galactic government worked, and what she saw troubled her. The Galactic Council had 12 members, representing the oldest and most advanced species. Everyone else was divided into ranks based on how long they had been members and what the council decided they were worth. Newer species could wait centuries just to get a minor vote on trade issues. Elena met the Novari ambassador, a being that looked almost human, except for its silver skin and large black eyes. "How long have your people been members?" she asked. 200 years, the Novari replied. "We invented the quantum tunnel drive that half the galaxy now uses. But we are still considered junior members." "What does that mean?" The Novari looked around nervously, then leaned closer. "We can speak in council meetings only when asked. We must perform the submission ritual before each session. Our votes count for 1/10 of what the senior members' votes count for." Elena watched a council session from the public gallery. The chamber was enormous, with the 12 senior members' seats arranged in a circle at the center. Around them, in carefully marked zones, stood representatives from dozens of other species. The junior members had to remain standing. Many of them had been there for hours. The session was about mining rights in a distant system. Elena listened as the senior members discussed the issue among themselves, barely acknowledging the other species present. When they finally allowed comments from junior members, each speaker had exactly 30 seconds to make their point. The Veltar representative who led the session was a being of living crystal that reflected light in impossible patterns. Its voice sounded like music played through glass. "The matter is decided," it announced. "The mining rights go to the Thakari Collective. Junior members may file appeals within the standard time frame. Elena learned that the standard time frame was 6 months, and appeals were rarely granted. After the session, she approached the Novari ambassador again. "How do you stand it?" she asked. "We are grateful for what we have," the Novari said quietly. "Before we joined the council, we were alone. Now we have protection, trade agreements, access to technology. The price. The price is worth paying." Elena spent her evenings reading the histories of species that had joined the council. The pattern was always the same. Species would petition for membership, be granted probationary status, and then spend decades or centuries proving their worth. They learned to follow the rules, to show proper respect, to accept their place in the galactic order. She read about the Kresh Rebellion, 400 years ago. They had objected to their rank and demanded equal treatment. The council had simply cut off all trade and communication with Kresh worlds until they submitted. The rebellion lasted less than a year. Elena also studied the species that had refused to join. Most had been isolated, their expansion limited, their technology advancement slowed by lack of access to galactic knowledge. A few had been destroyed in wars with council members. See yourself. Wars the council called police actions, to maintain galactic peace. On her 10th day at the station, Elena finally received word that the council would see her. She spent hours preparing her presentation about humanity's achievements. Humans had developed faster than light travel in just 2 centuries. When most species took millennia, they had terraformed dozens of worlds and created art and music that moved even alien minds. But as she prepared for the meeting, Elena couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen. The bowed heads of junior species, the careful, fearful way they spoke, the acceptance in the Novari ambassador's eyes when he talked about being grateful for scraps. Elena Rodriguez had been a colonel in the Terra Defense Force before becoming a diplomat. She had fought in the colonial wars, where humans had learned that sometimes the only choice was to fight or die. She had seen what happened to people who accepted that they deserved less than others. The next morning, she would stand before the Galactic Council and learn what they thought humanity was worth. But Elena had already decided something important. Whatever they offered, it had better be offered with respect. Because humans, Elena knew, had never been very good at bowing their heads. Elena stood in the waiting chamber, her hands steady despite the weight of what was about to happen. Through the walls, she could hear the low rumble of the council in session. They had been deliberating about humanity's application for 3 days, while she waited in diplomatic quarters that felt more like a comfortable prison. The chamber door opened with a soft hiss. Sktar appeared, his reptilian face carefully neutral. "Ambassador Rodriguez, the council will see you now." Elena followed him through corridors that grew more elaborate as they approached the council chamber. The walls were covered in symbols from dozens of species. Treaty marks, achievement records, submission documents. It was a museum of galactic order. And Elena realized that was exactly the point. The council chamber took her breath away. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, and the walls curved in perfect circles. In the center, 12 seats were arranged in a precise pattern based on galactic hierarchy. Each seat was designed for its occupant. Crystalline platforms for the Veltar. Energy containment fields for the Zephyrians. Hive connection pods for the Takari. Around these central seats, the chamber had designated areas marked by different colored floor sections. Elena could see representatives from dozens of species standing in their assigned zones. The newest members stood farthest from the center, behind actual barriers. She noticed that many of them had been standing for hours. There were no seats in the junior sections. "Approach," commanded a voice that sounded like singing crystal. Elena walked to the center of the chamber, where a simple circle was marked on the floor. Above her, the 12 council members looked down from their elevated positions. The effect was clearly designed to make petitioners feel small and powerless. Crystalline Prime among stars was even more impressive in person than Elena had expected. The Veltar leader was a being of living crystal that stood 3 meters tall, its surface reflecting and refracting light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. When it spoke, the sound came from every crystal face at once, creating harmony that was beautiful and terrifying. "The species designation, human, has been reviewed," Crystalline Prime announced. Your application for membership in the Galactic Council has been considered by the full assembly. Elena kept her face neutral, but her soldier's instincts were already reading the room. The tone, the positioning, the formal language. This was not going to be good news. The Zephyrian representative spoke next. Arch-current eternal appeared as a constantly shifting pattern of colored energy contained within a cylindrical field. Its voice was like wind through electricity. Your rapid technological development displays concerning aggressive tendencies. In 4 centuries, your species has expanded to 47 star systems. Most species require 2,000 years to achieve such spread. Elena wanted to point out that rapid development should be seen as a positive trait, not a threat. But she had learned that interrupting a council member was considered a grave insult. The Thakari Hive Queen added her voice to the judgment. She was the most alien of the council members Elena could see clearly. A massive insect being with compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights like black mirrors. When she spoke, Elena could hear the buzz and click of thousands of voices speaking as one. The individualistic nature of human society contradicts established principles of galactic harmony, the Hive Queen declared. Our analysis shows that humans frequently act independently of group consensus. This creates unpredictable behavior patterns that threaten stable governance. Elena bit back her first response, which would have been to ask why diversity of thought was considered dangerous. One by one, the other council members added their observations. The Murhai senator, speaking from a tank of blue liquid, criticized humanity's excessive territorial expansion patterns. The Kralex war chief noted humans' disturbing willingness to engage in armed conflict. The Ethereal Communion representative stated that humans showed dangerous emotional volatility. Elena listened to each criticism and realized what was happening. These beings had looked at humanity's greatest strengths: their curiosity, their independence, their willingness to explore and grow and fight for what they believed in, and decided these traits were flaws that needed to be corrected. After an hour of deliberation that Elena wasn't allowed to participate in, Crystalline Prime spoke the final judgment. The species designation, human, is granted probationary observer status, effective immediately. Elena felt her heart sink. Probationary observer status was the lowest possible classification. It was barely better than being ignored entirely. The terms of this status are as follows, Crystalline Prime continued. Humanity will be permitted to maintain 3 embassy staff members at this station. You may attend public council sessions but may not speak unless directly addressed. You may file formal requests for consideration, with a minimum response time of 6 months. The terms got worse. Human ships would need special permits to travel through most of galactic space. Human colonies would have limited access to galactic trade networks. Human representatives would not be allowed to vote on any matters, even those directly affecting human space. But the real insult came when Crystalline Prime delivered the final requirement. Your species will undergo a conditioning period to learn proper galactic etiquette and hierarchy appreciation. This education will be supervised by the Novari delegation, who have successfully demonstrated how a species can learn to appreciate the wisdom of council guidance. Elena glanced toward the Novari section and saw their ambassador. The silver-skinned being who had spoken to her about being grateful for scraps was now being assigned to teach humanity how to be grateful for their own scraps. The conditioning period will include instruction in proper submission protocols, appropriate deference behaviors, and acceptance of species ranking within the galactic order. The Hive Queen added, completion of this education is required before any advancement in status can be considered. Elena understood what they were really saying. They wanted to break humanity's spirit before allowing them even the smallest voice in galactic affairs. They wanted humans to learn to bow their heads and accept whatever they were given. Additionally, the Murhai senator added from her tank, humanity's expansion activities will be temporarily suspended, pending review of your species' long-term intentions. No new colonies may be established without council approval. Elena felt anger building in her chest like a slow fire. They were not just offering humanity a low rank. They were putting humanity in a cage. No expansion, no voice, no respect. Just decades or centuries of learning to be properly grateful for the privilege of being ignored. Around the chamber, representatives from other species watched the proceedings. Elena could see various reactions. Some sympathy, some indifference, some satisfaction that there was now a species ranked lower than their own. But what struck her most was the acceptance she saw in too many faces. These beings had all gone through this same process. They had all learned to swallow their pride and accept whatever the council offered. They had all been taught that this was simply how the galaxy worked. The formal ceremony will now commence, Crystalline Prime announced. Ambassador Rodriguez will perform the acknowledgement of station to confirm humanity's acceptance of these terms. Elena felt every eye in the chamber focus on her. She was supposed to kneel, place her palms flat on the floor, and speak the words that would bind humanity to this humiliating arrangement. She was supposed to say, "This species accepts its place in the cosmic order," while kneeling before beings who had just told her that humanity's place was at the bottom. Elena thought about the children playing in the low-gravity parks of Kepler Colony. She thought about the artists creating impossible sculptures in zero-G workshops. She thought about the scientists who had cracked the secrets of faster-than-light travel, while most of these species were still sending messages by carrier bird. She thought about 4 billion humans who had sent her here trusting that she would represent them with honor. 4 billion humans who had never learned to bow their heads to anyone. Elena Rodriguez stood in the center of the great council chamber, surrounded by the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and made a decision that would change everything. Elena looked down at the circle marked on the floor where she was supposed to kneel. The metal was polished smooth by countless other species who had stood in this exact spot and submitted to the council's will. How many beings had knelt here? How many had spoken the words of acceptance while their pride died? The chamber was absolutely silent, except for the soft hum of life support systems. 47 species held their breath, waiting to see humanity take its place at the bottom of the galactic order. Crystalline Prime's voice filled the silence, each word precise and musical. "You will now perform the acknowledgement of station. Kneel and place your palms upon the floor. Speak the words. This species accepts its place in the cosmic order." Elena remained standing. She looked up at each council member in turn, meeting their eyes, or what passed for eyes among energy beings and crystal entities. The Veltar's crystalline faces reflected her image dozens of times, making her appear small and scattered. The Zephyrian's energy patterns pulsed with what might have been impatience. The Takari Hive Queen's compound eyes glittered like black stars. "Ambassador Rodriguez," Crystalline Prime said, and now there was a note of warning in the musical tone. "You will perform the ceremony." Elena thought about her grandmother, who had hidden Jewish families during the war and told the Nazis to go to hell when they came looking. She thought about her father, who had led the first colonial expedition to Kepler 442 and planted a flag on an alien world because no one had told humans they couldn't. She thought about her daughter, who was probably watching this moment on delayed transmission back on Earth. What would her daughter see? Would she see her mother kneeling before alien masters? Would she grow up believing that humans were supposed to bow their heads and accept whatever they were given? "I said kneel," the Hive Queen commanded, her thousands of voices creating a sound like an angry swarm. Elena's military training had taught her to follow orders. Her diplomatic training had taught her to find compromise. But her human training, 4 billion years of evolution that had taught humans to stand upright and look the universe in the eye, taught her something else. Instead of kneeling, Elena Rodriguez raised her right hand. She lifted it slowly, deliberately, making sure every being in the chamber could see what she was doing. Her fingers curled into a fist, except for one. Her middle finger extended straight up, pointing toward the chamber's distant ceiling. The gesture was unmistakably human, unmistakably defiant, and unmistakably clear in its meaning. Elena held the gesture steady while she spoke. Her voice carried across the chamber's perfect acoustics, reaching every corner, every delegation, every recording device that was broadcasting this moment across the galaxy. "Humanity declines," she said. Those 2 words hit the chamber like a physical blow. Elena saw Crystalline Prime's crystal body flash with rapid color changes, probably the Veltar equivalent of shock. The Zephyrian's energy pattern flickered and sparked. The Hive Queen's buzz became a sharp, angry whine. Elena kept her middle finger raised for exactly 10 seconds, long enough to make sure everyone understood what they were seeing, short enough to avoid overstaying the impact. Then she lowered her hand and turned toward the exit. "Stop," commanded the Murhai senator from her water tank, her voice bubbling with authority. "You cannot simply leave. The ceremony must be completed." Elena paused at the edge of the circle but didn't turn around. "The ceremony is completed. You offered humanity a place, and humanity gave you our answer. This is unprecedented," the Krolek's war chief growled, his scarred face twisting with confusion. "Species do not refuse council membership. Species do not insult the council," added the ethereal communion representative, its voice like wind through empty spaces. Elena turned back to face the assembly. The chamber had erupted into chaos. Representatives from junior species were talking in urgent whispers. Some looked shocked, others frightened, and a few seemed almost excited. The senior council members were communicating rapidly among themselves in lights, energy patterns, and harmonics that Elena couldn't understand. "With respect," Elena said, and her tone made it clear how little respect she actually felt. "The insult was in your offer, not in my response. You looked at humanity's achievements and decided we needed to be taught humility. You saw our independence and called it dangerous. You witnessed our growth and decided it was threatening." She gestured toward the junior species sections. "You created a system where civilizations that have contributed wonders to the galaxy still stand like servants, waiting for permission to speak. You made cooperation into submission and called it order." Crystalline Prime's voice boomed through the chamber, harmonics crackling with what Elena recognized as anger. "Your species is young and ignorant. The galactic order has maintained peace for 50,000 years. Your order," Elena replied, "is based on fear. Fear of change, fear of new ideas, fear of species that refuse to accept that old means better." She looked around the chamber again. 50,000 years of peace, and yet half the species in this room are afraid to speak above a whisper. The Novari ambassador stepped forward from his section, his silver face twisted with what Elena realized was terror. "Please, Ambassador Rodriguez, reconsider. Isolation from the galactic community means death for civilizations. My people learned this. We were proud once, but we learned better." The Council's wisdom," Elena interrupted, "teaches species to be grateful for scraps from the master's table. How's that working out for you, Ambassador? After 200 years, do you feel like an equal member of this community?" The Navari's mouth opened, then closed. He looked around the chamber helplessly, caught between truth and the carefully learned responses of 2 centuries. Elena continued walking toward the exit. Behind her, the chaos grew louder. She could hear rapid communications between council members, urgent discussions among junior species, and what sounded like several different kinds of alarm bells. "Where are you going?" the Hive Queen demanded. Elena paused at the great doors that led out of the chamber. "Back to human space. To tell 4 billion humans exactly what kind of partnership the galactic community offers. To tell them that the greatest civilization in the galaxy thinks humanity's proper place is on its knees." She looked back one more time at the assembly. "But here's what you need to understand about humans. We've never been very good at staying on our knees. We tend to stand up and build something better instead." The doors opened with a whisper of displaced air. Elena Rodriguez, Ambassador of Earth and representative of humanity, walked out of the Galactic Council chamber with her head high and her back straight. Behind her, she left 47 alien species and 12 council members trying to understand what had just happened. None of them had ever seen a species simply refuse the galactic order. None of them knew what to do with beings who would rather walk alone than crawl with company. Elena reached her quarters and immediately began composing a message to Earth. The transmission would take weeks to reach home, but she wanted her government to understand the situation before the Council's own version of events arrived. She began typing, "Message to Terra Command. Initial diplomatic contact with Galactic Council. Unsuccessful. They offered humanity a position of permanent subservience disguised as membership. I responded with appropriate human diplomacy." Elena paused, smiled, and added, "Recommend we start working on Plan B." We're going to need to be ready for whatever comes next. As she sent the message, Elena wondered what the council was discussing in her absence. She had just done something unprecedented in 50,000 years of galactic history. She had absolutely no idea how right she was about the chaos she had left behind. The council chamber remained in chaos for 6 hours after Elena's departure. In 50,000 years of galactic governance, no species had ever simply refused membership and walked away. The administrative systems that governed half the galaxy had no protocols for what had just happened. Crystalline Prime called for emergency analysis of the incident. Within an hour, specialist teams from each council member species were studying recordings of Elena's gesture from every possible angle. The Veltar analysis came first. As beings of living crystal who communicated through light patterns and geometric forms, they examined the physical properties of Elena's gesture with mathematical precision. The extended appendage formed a perfect perpendicular line to the closed fist, reported subprime calculator of forms. In geometric terms, this represents the intersection of the finite with the infinite. Combined with the human's verbal declaration, we conclude this symbolizes humanity's claim to singular dominance over all galactic space. The crystal beings passed this interpretation through their collective consciousness in flashes of light that filled their section of the chamber. Their conclusion was unanimous. Humanity had declared themselves superior to all other species and claimed the right to rule the galaxy. The Zephyrian collective approached the problem from their perspective as energy-based beings. They had recorded the electromagnetic patterns generated by Elena's brain during the gesture and analyzed them with quantum precision. The neural activity spike occurred simultaneously with aggressive postural display, reported the entity known as current of analysis flowing. Energy patterns indicate directed hostile intent toward all present consciousness forms. The gesture served as a focusing mechanism for transmission of mental aggression patterns across species barriers. To the Zephyrians, Elena's raised finger was essentially a weapon, a way to project hostile thoughts directly into alien minds. They concluded that humans possessed some form of psychic warfare capability that they had just demonstrated against the entire council. The Takari Hive Queen processed the incident through mathematical probability models. Her millions of linked minds calculated thousands of scenarios simultaneously, feeding data through algorithms perfected over millennia. Single appendage represents 20% of available digital extremities, she announced to her swarm. Mathematical projection indicates escalating commitment to hostility. Current 20% displays probability curve leading to 100% aggressive response within calculable time frame. The hive mind's conclusion was that humanity was testing galactic defenses. The single finger was just the beginning. Soon humans would deploy all their digital weapons in coordinated attacks across the galaxy. As the interpretations spread through the galactic communication network, each species added their own cultural understanding to the analysis. The warrior caste Kralex had a simple interpretation. Single appendage raised equals challenge to combat, declared War Chief Skartok. Human female issues formal challenge to strongest warriors of galaxy. Response requires acceptance or admission of cowardice. The Kralex began immediate preparations for what they assumed would be single combat between their greatest champion and Elena Rodriguez. They had completely missed the diplomatic nature of the event and saw only a challenge to honorable battle. The peaceful Murhai, who communicated through careful water movements and chemical signals, reached a different conclusion. Extended extremity displays pollution marker, announced Senator Blue Deep, thoughtful from her life support tank. Human species indicates contamination of self and environment. Gesture warns of spreading toxicity. The aquatic beings began immediate quarantine protocols for all human-occupied space. They interpreted Elena's gesture as a warning that humanity was diseased and dangerous to approach. The ancient ethereal communion, beings of pure thought who had transcended physical form eons ago, saw mystical significance in the gesture. The raised digit represents the singular path to enlightenment, their representative announced. Humanity claims to possess the one true spiritual wisdom and rejects all other paths as inferior. They began preparing defensive meditations to protect their collective consciousness from what they saw as an attempted spiritual conquest. Perhaps the most tragic response came from the Novari. Their ambassador, still trembling from his confrontation with Elena, reported to his homeworld that humanity had displayed signs of the madness that comes from isolation. The silver-skinned people, desperate to maintain their hard-won position in galactic society, immediately issued statements distancing themselves from humanity and volunteering to help contain what they called the human contamination of diplomatic order. Within 12 hours, the incident report had reached every major civilization in the galaxy. Trade algorithms automatically flagged human space as potentially hostile territory. Shipping companies rerouted vessels away from human-controlled systems. Insurance rates for travel near human space increased by 3,000%. Emergency sessions convened across the galaxy as local governments tried to understand the threat level. The gesture that Elena intended as simple defiance was interpreted as everything from a declaration of war to a religious crusade to a biological contamination warning. The Council's response was swift and overwhelming. They activated Containment Protocol 7, a set of measures designed for species showing imminent, hostile expansion tendencies. Trade routes to human systems were officially closed. Diplomatic immunity for human vessels was revoked. Human exploration ships were warned to turn back or face protective intervention from Council forces. Communication networks that connected human colonies to the broader galaxy were restricted. Scientific exchanges were suspended. Educational programs that had allowed young humans to study at galactic universities were terminated. The irony was lost on everyone except a few junior species representatives who had witnessed Elena's actual words. The Council was responding to humanity's refusal to be contained by containing them. End 1. Meanwhile, Elena's transport ship continued its journey back toward human space, carrying news of what had happened. The ship's communication system recorded dozens of incoming messages from galactic sources, but Elena ordered them all stored without reading. She suspected they would not be particularly diplomatic. What Elena didn't know was that her gesture had already become the most analyzed moment in galactic history. Xenobiology departments across hundreds of worlds were studying human anatomy to understand how the digital weapon system functioned. Military analysts were calculating response strategies for human territorial expansion campaigns. Religious scholars were debating whether humanity's claim to singular enlightenment represented a threat to galactic spiritual stability. On the Thakari homeworld, millions of minds worked together to model every possible human response to the containment protocol. Their calculations showed a 97% probability that humans would attempt to break through galactic blockades within 6 months, leading to what their projections called cascade conflict probability. The Veltar began constructing crystalline barrier networks around their most important systems, designed to deflect what they assumed would be humanity's geometric dominance attacks. The Zephyrians started developing new energy shields to protect against psychic aggression patterns. The most massive response came from the Council itself. For the first time in 20,000 years, they activated the Emergency Fleet, a combined force drawn from all 12 senior member species. The fleet's mission was to maintain galactic stability by positioning themselves around human space and preventing any expansion attempts. 300 ships from a dozen species began moving toward human territory, carrying enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. The fleet commanders had orders to prevent human expansion by any means necessary to preserve galactic peace. All of this because Elena Rodriguez had raised one finger and said humanity declined to kneel. But there was one critical factor that none of the galactic powers had considered in their analysis. They had never actually asked humanity what the gesture meant. They were about to learn that when you don't understand someone's culture, your response to their actions can be far more dangerous than the actions themselves. And 4 billion humans were about to show the galaxy what happened when you tried to build a cage around a species that had never learned the word impossible. Elena's message reached Earth 3 weeks after her departure from the Confluence Station. The transmission was brief, professional, and ended with a recommendation that humanity should prepare for diplomatic complications. What it didn't mention was that 47 alien civilizations now considered humans a galactic threat. The first sign of trouble came when the trade ships stopped arriving. Human colonies across the galaxy suddenly found their regular supply runs cancelled without explanation. The luxury items from distant worlds, the exotic materials for advanced manufacturing, the tourist vessels that brought alien visitors, all of it simply stopped. Dr. Sarah Chen, director of the Mars Terraforming Project, was in her laboratory when the official notice arrived. The Galactic Weather Monitoring Service was terminating all contracts with human colonies, effective immediately. The reason given was security concerns related to atmospheric manipulation technology. Sarah read the notice 3 times, then walked to her window overlooking the red plains that her team was slowly turning green. After 15 years of work, they were halfway through transforming Mars into a garden world. The galactic community had always praised the project as an example of responsible planetary development. Security concerns, she muttered. They think terraforming is a weapon. Sarah activated her personal communication system and recorded a message that would be broadcast to both the human network and the galactic community. She stood in front of her laboratory's main window, with the growing Martian forests visible behind her. This is Dr. Sarah Chen responding to the Galactic Weather Service's termination notice. She began calmly. You seem concerned about our atmospheric manipulation technology. Let me explain exactly how it works. For the next 20 minutes, Sarah delivered a detailed technical explanation of terraforming science. She described how humans used carefully controlled bacteria to convert atmospheric gases, how they managed soil chemistry through engineered microorganisms, and how they created weather patterns through strategic placement of heat generators. This technology, she concluded, has transformed 17 dead worlds into living biospheres that now support 4 million human colonists. If you consider this a threat, then you clearly don't understand what a threat actually looks like. Sarah paused, looked directly into the camera, and slowly raised her middle finger. Here's my response to your security concerns, she said, holding the gesture steady. Mars will be green within 5 years, with or without your permission. Earth out. The broadcast reached 67 worlds within a day. Within a week, similar messages were coming from human colonies across the galaxy. Captain James Okafor of the Deep Space Exploration Vessel, Times Curiosity Times, received his termination orders while surveying a promising star system near the galactic rim. The message was from the Council's Expansion Monitoring Authority, ordering him to cease all aggressive exploration activities beyond authorized human territory. James read the message while floating in the zero-gravity observation dome of his ship. Below him, a beautiful blue world turned slowly, showing continents that had never known intelligent life. His survey had already confirmed that the planet could support human settlement. Aggressive exploration, James said to his crew. They think looking at planets is an act of war. James activated his ship's broadcast system and transmitted on all galactic frequencies. The message included a detailed star map showing 17 new habitable worlds that Times Curiosity Times had discovered in the past year, all located in unclaimed space beyond any species' territorial boundaries. This is Captain James Okafor to the Galactic Council's Expansion Monitoring Authority, he began. You've ordered us to stop exploring. Here's our response. James held up both hands in front of the camera and extended both middle fingers. These 17 worlds are now claimed by humanity under the right of first discovery, he announced. We'll be bringing colonists here within the year. If you don't like it, you're welcome to try stopping us. The gesture spread like a virus through human space. Within days, scientists were ending their lectures by casually flipping off their cameras. Colonial administrators were concluding official statements with raised middle fingers. Children in schools were giggling as they learned what their teachers called diplomatic protocol. But it wasn't just symbolic defiance. The galactic trade embargo had an unexpected effect on human civilization. It forced them to become completely self-sufficient. And humans discovered they were very good at it. Agricultural worlds that had imported luxury foods from across the galaxy suddenly focused on developing their own specialties. Within months, the hydroponics farms of Europa Station were producing fruits that made alien delicacies seem bland by comparison. Manufacturing centers that had relied on exotic materials from distant worlds found ways to synthesize what they needed. Human chemical engineers, freed from dependence on galactic suppliers, began creating new materials that were stronger and cheaper than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Scientific stations that had been part of galactic research networks started sharing data exclusively with other human colonies. The results were remarkable. Without the bureaucratic delays of galactic academic committees, human research accelerated rapidly. Breakthrough discoveries that might have taken decades in the galactic system happened in months. The most significant change was in attitude. For the first time since encountering alien civilizations, humans stopped trying to fit into the galactic community and started building their own. The Council watched these developments with growing alarm. Their economic models had predicted that isolation would force humanity to submit within 6 months. Instead, human space was becoming more prosperous and more independent every day. The situation reached a crisis point when Elena's transport ship reached the edge of human space, only to be intercepted by the emergency fleet. 300 alien warships surrounded her small diplomatic vessel, demanding surrender under Galactic Containment Protocol 7. Elena's response was broadcast live to every human colony and, through intercepted signals, to the galactic community. "This is Ambassador Elena Rodriguez to the Galactic Council," she said, speaking from her ship's communication center. "You've surrounded my vessel with military force because I refused to kneel before you. You've blockaded human space because we won't submit to your hierarchy. You've declared us a threat because we choose to stand upright." Elena stood up from her chair and moved to face the camera directly. "Let me clarify something for you," she continued. "When a human raises their middle finger, it means, go to hell. It's not a declaration of war, not a claim to galactic dominance, not a spiritual crusade. It means we think you're acting like an ass, and we're not interested in playing your games." She raised her own middle finger toward the camera. "But since you've decided to treat it as a declaration of war, let me give you something to really worry about." Elena nodded to someone off camera, and the transmission switched to a wide-angle view showing thousands of human ships emerging from jump space around the emergency fleet. Colonists, cargo haulers, scientific vessels, and exploration ships, every human vessel within 50 light-years, had come to escort their ambassador home. "These are not warships," Elena announced. "These are farmers and scientists and teachers and artists. They came here because you threatened their representative. They're not here to fight you. They're here to remind you that humanity doesn't hide behind walls." The human fleet outnumbered the emergency fleet 3-1. More importantly, the composition of the human response sent a message that the galactic powers finally understood. Humans didn't separate military and civilian leadership. When threatened, the entire population became the resistance. Elena's final message was simple. "The Council offered humanity membership on the condition that we learn to crawl. We declined. You responded with threats and blockades. We responded by becoming more human than ever." She gestured toward the massed human fleet around them. "We're going home now. You can follow us if you want. But you should understand something. We've spent the past months becoming completely independent of your galaxy. We don't need your trade, your technology, or your permission. We're building our own civilization now." Elena paused, looked directly into the camera, and delivered her final line. "But if you'd like to join us as equals, the offer is still open. We'll be the ones not kneeling." The transmission ended, and the human fleet began moving toward their space. The emergency fleet had orders to stop any human expansion, but they were facing a situation their commanders had never anticipated. What do you do with people who are expanding toward home? 6 months later, Crystalline Prime Among Stars sent an unprecedented message to Elena Rodriguez, who had been elected by unanimous human vote as Ambassador of Independent Space. The message requested formal negotiations for mutually beneficial diplomatic relations between equal partners. For the first time in galactic history, the Council was asking to join someone else instead of the other way around. Elena's response was gracious, professional, and ended with a simple statement. "Looking forward to working with you as equals. No kneeling required." The negotiations established humanity as the first species in galactic history to join the Council as full members from day one. The vote was unanimous. After all, when faced with 4 billion humans who refuse to be governed, even the most hierarchical government learns the value of compromise. Elena kept one tradition from her diplomatic service. She ended every major treaty signing by raising her middle finger toward the cameras, followed immediately by extending her hand for a handshake. The galaxy learned to see both gestures as equally diplomatic. After all, the best treaties are signed between partners who respect each other enough to be honest about their feelings.